Hi travel bugs, I hope that you're doing well. Today Kathrine and I are out exploring in nature at Powdermill Nature Reserve, which is the research station and education center for the Carnegie Museum of Natural History in Pittsburgh. So Powdermill was founded in 1956 by the Carnegie Museum of Natural History to be a research station for their scientists, but also be a place for students and the public to come explore and learn about nature. So you can see exhibits inside their nature center, and they also have about 2,200 acres of land to explore. So today we are out on a hike, and although it is the beginning of January, there is still a lot of nature that we can see. I'm already hearing some birds singing right now, so I've got my binoculars and I've got some apps that we're going to use to identify and track birds, and we're also going to look and see if there are any plants out. There's some moss and lichens and a couple of different ferns that are still blooming right now, so I'm curious to see if we're able to find more of those. And of course it's really nice to be out in the fresh air at the beginning of a new year. So Powdermill has 3 trails that you can hike: the Black Birch Trail, the Sugar Camp Trail, and the Porcupine Ridge Trail. So we're starting on the Sugar Camp Trail, and although we are out exploring and enjoying nature, we are first going to look for something that isn't really natural. We're going to try to find a geocache. We're going after our first geocache, and I think it's over this way. This is our first geocache of 2021, and inside we have a little alligator guy, an army man, a St. Vincent pencil, how appropriate. So we are enjoying our hike along the Sugar Camp Trail, and we are very much enjoying the beautiful trees. Now the trees right now aren't dead. They are actually just sleeping for the winter time. Now a lot of deciduous trees do drop their leaves, and that's to kind of help reduce water loss. Water is constantly moving up and down through the trees, going out into the branches and out into the leaves, but in the fall, most deciduous trees do drop the leaves. But there are some trees that do keep their leaves, including oaks, hornbeams, and beeches, like this one here. An American beech is a really common tree that you'll find along the East Coast and in the Appalachian region, and in the wintertime they're easy to identify because they keep these buff-colored leaves on their tree. And scientists are still trying to understand why some of these trees keep their leaves. It might be to protect them from animals like deer that will try to eat the stems and the twigs of the tree, or it could be that in the springtime these leaves are going to drop and it'll provide a mulch underneath the tree to help it grow and thrive in the spring and summer. So this is a natural mystery that people are still trying to understand, and you can look for these leaves out on the American beech tree when you're hiking in the wintertime. So I'm now going to add this tree to iNaturalist, which is an app that we use to help identify and log different plants and animals that we find. So I'm going to take a picture of its leaves. Get a good shot of this there. It started to snow on our hike. So we're on our hunt for the second cache in the snow. So for this one, the coordinates were a little off. Thanks to other logs, we were able to tell that, so we had to use our geosense a little bit, but needless to say, we found it.
So we've had snow off and on for the last couple of weeks. In the last few days it has been warm and raining, and so a lot of the snow has melted, but it has transformed our trail into a little stream. And in the next couple of weeks, probably in early March or so, this water is going to be really important because it is going to collect into what are called vernal pools, where frogs, toads, and salamanders can lay their eggs. So another interesting thing about walking in the woods at winter is that sometimes not having the leaves on the trees or the understory plants can reveal different parts of the forest that you wouldn't typically see in the summer. So for example, behind me is a mound, and this mound was produced during strip mining that took place here in the 1940s, before this was a nature reserve. If this were all covered with plants and the leaves from the trees, you wouldn't really probably be able to see this, or you might think it's a natural feature where it's actually a man-made feature. So that's one of the advantages of walking in the winter. So this is a nice example of how the land in this area has changed over time. So originally Pennsylvania was covered in old growth forest, and a lot of that was clear cut in the 19th and 20th centuries, which allowed for mineral mining. Particularly here we have a lot of coal, so there was underground subsurface mining as well as strip mining, which is what took place here. And so this was sort of left behind from that, and now there is an effort to conserve places like this. So now this area here has been allowed to turn into a forest again, and eventually this mound will go away after many, many years of nature kind of reclaiming it.
Here we have an example of lichen. So lichen is a symbiotic relationship between algae and fungus. So the fungus provides the physical structure while the algae provides the nutrients that they produce through photosynthesis. So here on this tree where we see this kind of like flat, flaky, light green, that's the lichen, and then this more fuzzy, dark green is an example of just moss. So you can find lichen in multiple places in the forest. You can find it on the sides of trees, and you can find it on rocks any time of the year.
When we usually do tree identification, we're thinking about looking at the leaves, but there are other parts of the tree that we can look at to help identify them. So we can look at the buds. There are many different types of buds that grow on trees, and that can be an identifying feature. You can look at the general shape or size of the tree or the way that the limbs grow, and you can also look at the bark. Now, some tree bark does look very similar to each other, and it can be difficult to identify. Some trees have really easy to identify bark, and this is a nice example of one. This is what's called a shagbark hickory. This is one of my favorite trees. What's really cool about shagbark hickory is it has bark that almost sort of looks like it's peeling off. This type of bark is called exfoliating because it's not completely attached to the tree like you would see in a maple or an oak. Now, it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with the tree or that it's sick or that the bark is, needs to fall off. This is just naturally how it looks. So this is a nice example of a tree that you can look at the bark and easily identify it. This is another nice tree that's easy to identify in the winter time. It's a smaller tree, so its small size helps you identify it, and it also has really interesting bark. This is called hornbeam or musclewood, and it's called musclewood because it kind of has this muscly kind of texture to it. The bark itself is smooth, but the trunk is kind of bumpy, so that's a really easy way to identify. We just finished our hike on the Sugar Camp Trail, and the whole time that we've been hiking, I have been tracking our walk on eBird. So eBird is an app through the Cornell Lab of Ornithology that allows you to make a checklist of the different birds that you see. So what we saw today was a hairy woodpecker, a pileated woodpecker, which was really cool. I was able to see it through the binoculars flying up above the trees. And we saw a white-breasted nuthatch. It was crawling up the top of one of the trees, and they're really cool because they kind of climb up and down the sides of trees. And then we also saw an eastern bluebird right when we started on our walk, and that was really cool because it's such a bright, beautiful blue color, and amongst all of the brown and gray colors in the forest, it's like a really nice little surprise. So while eBird keeps a checklist of all the birds that you've seen on your walk, you can also use the Merlin Bird ID app, and that allows you to actually look up different bird species, and you can listen to different calls. So here's the eastern bluebird, and so we can listen to its pretty song. And we can also see a map of its range. So we see here that it belongs in Pennsylvania year-round.
Starting our next hike here at Powdermill, we're going to go along the Black Birch Trail. This trail is about a half a mile long and goes along Powdermill Run. So earlier we saw how the snowmelt runoff was coming down off the mountain, and we talked about vernal pools. Well, here we have a vernal pool behind us. Even though right now it's very cold and this water will likely freeze over, in a couple of weeks this area will become full of life for amphibians. Powdermill Run has been designated an exceptional value stream. This means that the water in Powdermill Run is much better quality compared to others in Pennsylvania. The water is able to support life for salamanders, other amphibians, macroinvertebrates, and insects.
So thanks so much for joining us on our winter hike. We really loved seeing what was out in the forest today at Powdermill.
Yeah, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you like this video, and thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks so much. Bye.